Good morning. We are going to go to our 8-3 notes. So we're going to cut a lot of the stuff out. This is going to be a challenge, given the fact that the activity that I do for this will not work at all without being in person. So we are going to skip the first full page, and we are going to come down here to the second page, and we're going to get started with the trigonomic ratios. So what we're doing is the last 2 weeks we talked about solving special right triangles. When it's a 30, 60, 90, 45, 45, 90 triangle, those have very easy relationships for us to be able to solve. Trigonometry is the way to solve all right triangles, given just an angle and a side length, okay? So this part is going to be confusing. It's really going to make sense when you start doing examples, but I got to explain to you what's going on. So if I give you, it has to be a right triangle. So if I give you a right triangle and I give you one side length and one angle, okay, the way that we figure out, we have three different trig functions to use. And those three trig functions are these, is this column right here. So first of all, the memory device or the acronym that's used to decipher what trig function is called SOHCAHTOA. So is the SOH, CA, CAH, and TOA, TOA. And each one of those three acronyms tell you what part of the triangle you need to use this. So if we're going to use the sine function that deals with the opposite and the hypotenuse. If we were to use the cosine function, that deals with the adjacent and the hypotenuse. And if we were to use the tangent function, that deals with the opposite and the adjacent. Okay? Again, it'll make sense as we go through some of these examples. Now, these are all ratios. Okay? So, we need to know how to set up the ratio. Well, the way that SOHCAHTOA is spelled, the order in which it's spelled tells you what goes on top, what goes on bottom. So, for example, if you had to use the sine function, okay, so is spelled S-O-H. Well, the O is listed first, so it goes on top. Below it would be the hypotenuse. Okay, the cosine function, if you were to use the cosine function, it is spelled A-H, so the adjacent value goes on top. The hypotenuse would be your denominator. And then tangent is spelled OA, opposite over adjacent. Now, like I said, this will make a lot more sense once we do some examples. So as you go to the next page, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the examples that I have, and I'm going to give you, instead, three different examples that we're just going to draw here on our own. So, I know it's a lot, but like I said, it'll make sense once we do a couple. So, in this case, let's pretend that I gave you this kind of triangle. I gave you a right triangle, and you had a right angle. One angle was 33 degrees. This side length was 10, and this was x. Okay, I have two rules that I make kids follow when they do this. Okay, rule one is to stand at the angle you're given. I'll explain that in a minute, but stand at angle given, not the right angle. So you never stand at the right angle because you're technically given the right angle and a different one. When I teach this in person, I literally have a triangle on the floor and I have kids stand on the angle that they are given. So I will draw a stick figure to represent that. Okay, so if I stand at 33 degrees, that leads me to step 2, which is to always label the hypotenuse. Now again, remember the hypotenuse is the side that is opposite of the right angle. In this case, it was already labeled x, but I'm going to label it hypotenuse. Now, you had other choices. You had the hypotenuse, you had the opposite angle, or the opposite side rather, and the adjacent. I'm going to label all of them. Well, I already labeled the hypotenuse. So if I'm standing here, this side would be opposite. It wasn't labeled at all. There's no value there. I don't care about it, so I cross it out. 10 is adjacent, which if you recall is that fancy word for next to. So the way I figure out what trig function to use is because I'm standing at the angle that is 33 degrees, I am dealing with the hypotenuse and the adjacent. So as I think back to how SOHCAHTOA is spelled, SOHCAHTOA, I'm looking for the trig function that deals with A and H. Well, sine deals with opposite and hypotenuse, so that's not it. Cosine deals with adjacent and hypotenuse. That's the one I want to use. So I'm going to use the cosine function. Now, we are just going to set these up. I'm not going to solve anything yet. I just want to practice our setup. So, when I set this up, this is always the trig function of the angle. So, it's the cosine of 33 degrees, and it's a proportion, so it's over 1, as it's spelled ka. Okay, so the A comes first, which is the adjacent. So it's 10 over hypotenuse, which is x. Okay, that'd be the setup. Again, later on in these, we will work on how to actually solve this. Okay, let's do another one. So let's pretend that I gave you this triangle here. Let's get some of these marks out of the way. Let's pretend hypothetically this was a right angle. Let's pretend this angle was 67 degrees, this was 7, and this was x. Okay, so rule 1 was to stand the angle that was given. That's not the right angle, so I'm going to stand up here at 67 degrees. Okay, and then step 2 was to label your hypotenuse. Well, this is my right angle. Opposite of that is the 7, and that is my hypotenuse. Okay? If I'm standing at 67, this side over here is opposite or across from me. That is labeled x. This is the adjacent. It was not labeled at all, so I don't care about it. Okay, so I need the trig function that deals with opposite and hypotenuse. So what trig function, the s, the c, or the t, has o and h immediately after it? Well, that is sine. So it's the sine of the trig function, or the angle you're standing at, which is 67, as opposite over hypotenuse, because it is spelled O over H. Okay? We'll do one more quick example here. Just want to make sure you guys are good with your setup. I know this is a lot. I know it's kind of coming out of left field, but hopefully this helps. Last example here, we'll do 25, 8, and x. All right, so stand at the angle that you're given. That's not the right angle, so we stand at the 25-degree angle mark. We label our hypotenuse. Now, in this case, the hypotenuse was not marked at all. It wasn't labeled like these sides are, so I don't care about the hypotenuse. But I labeled it because, technically, when you're standing here, both this side and this side are both your adjacent side. They're both next to you. But one of them is a hypotenuse. That's why I have you label it first. Okay, now, since I already said this is the adjacent, 8 is next to you if you're standing here. That means this is the opposite. It's across from you. So I need to know what trig function deals with opposite and adjacent. That's tangent, because the T has an O and an A after it. So, to set this up, because it's spelled TOA, the tangent of the angle, 25, over 1 is equal to opposite over adjacent, which is 8. So that's how we solve these. Or that's how we set them up. It's not how we solve them, that's how we set them up. So that's just the setup. The algebra is actually very easy, just kids need to know how to type this stuff into their calculator. So let's jump down to these examples here. And what we're going to do, we're going to do the exact same thing over and over again. All right, we're going to stand at the angle we're given. We're given the angle that's 54 degrees. I labeled this side because this is my hypotenuse. It's opposite of the right angle. Okay. This is adjacent to me. This is opposite to me. I don't care about the A. It wasn't marked. So the trig function that deals with hypotenuse and opposite O and H is sine. So I'm going to use the sine function. So sine of 54 over 1 is equal to, it's spelled SOH, S-O-H. So it's opposite, W, over hypotenuse, which is 17. Okay? Now, to solve this, it's a proportion. This number is an irrational number. It's easier to leave it as sine 54 than it is to write out the irrational decimal. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to leave it as sine 54 as long as possible. So this is still your variable. So the old adage, cross multiply and divide, is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take these two numbers, we're going to multiply them. 17 times the sine of 54. And multiply these is equal to 1 times W, which is just W. Okay? Now, in your calculator, okay, it's very important that you have your calculator in degrees. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to post a separate video to consolidate the time, and I will explain to you how to do the different keystrokes on your calculator. But for this, all you do is you cross multiply. All right, when you do 17 times the sine of 54, W comes out to be 13.7. Okay? I'm going to skip B for the moment. I want to do C first because B's got a little bit of a nuance I'm not ready for yet. But right now for C. All right, for C, you're going to stand at the angle you're given, which is 33. We're going to label our hypotenuse. Well, here's my right angle. Across from it is my hypotenuse, 4.5. This is adjacent or next to me. This side that is not labeled at all is the opposite, therefore I don't care about it. So I need to use the trig function, SOHCAHTOA, that deals with adjacent and hypotenuse. Well, that's C, C-A-H. So I'm going to take the cosine of 33 over 1 is equal to, because it's spelled ka, W is adjacent, so it goes on top. The hypotenuse comes second. 4.5 goes on the bottom. So that's my setup. I'm going to cross multiply. I get 4.5 times the cosine of 33 is equal to W. Okay? When I type that all into my calculator, I believe W should be 3.7. Okay? Final one is example B. This one's a little bit tricky, a little bit different, but the process is all the same nonetheless. Stand at the angle you're given. You never stand at the right angle. I'm going to label my hypotenuse. Here is my right angle. Okay? Opposite of that is my hypotenuse. That is not labeled at all. I don't care about it. So I'm going to cross it out, but I'm going to keep it labeled. W is the adjacent side. The 1.0 is the opposite side. So I need to use the trig function that deals with opposite and adjacent. So SOHCAHTOA. The T is TOA. So therefore the tangent function of 28 over 1 is equal to, it's spelled O then A, so the opposite is your numerator, the adjacent or the W is your denominator. Now when you cross multiply, you'll notice something different happens. When I cross multiply, I get W times the tangent of 28. 1 times 1 is 1. Again, tangent of 28 is an ugly number, but it's just a number. Okay, so if I had given you W times 10 equals 1, you would divide both sides by 10. and you'd have your answer. Well, this works the exact same way. I'm just going to divide by the tangent of 28, which is just a number. So if I divide both sides by the tangent of 28, okay, these cancel on the left, so I have W is equal to 1 divided by tangent of 28, and when you type that into your calculator, I think you get 1.8. Okay, now, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to do the second half of the notes later in the week. I'm going to stop here. You have a homework assignment posted. If there's questions, please email. But more importantly, like I said, their keystroke examples, or directions rather, will be posted in a separate video that is imperative that you watch before you go through and try and solve these in your calculator. Because if you have one setting not right in your calculator, you're going to be doing it correctly, but it's going to give you the wrong answer. I'll explain that in a minute. Okay, so check out that video. Hopefully you saw that before you watched this. But if you have any questions, email me. I know this is a lot, but like I said, I can email answers, videos the best I can. Take care.